Hello, everyone. Welcome to a beginner's guide on the Cessna 172 with the G1000 avionics platform. The purpose of this video is to kind of give you an opportunity to kind of see what makes the 172 go. We've done videos with the 172 before, but I said, it might be kind of nice to just kind of take a look at it from a beginner's perspective rather than, hey, I know a little bit about flight sims, let's do it. So the Cessna 172 was basically designed way back in the old late 1940s, early 1950s as I just need an airplane to get going. This thing is literally the Toyota Camry, the Toyota Corolla, the Honda Civic of the air. It's not a fast plane, but it is stable. And if you do not put any gas in it, you might just be able to hold three people, actually four people, if you really don't put any gas in it. Some of the later versions are a little bit more competent than some of the earlier versions. And again, this was the plane I cut my teeth on in the real world. And ironically, or interestingly enough, this is also the airport where I first flew a Cessna 172. This is a lovely Simsbury Airport. So let's go ahead and kind of walk you through it, especially if you're kind of new to Microsoft Flight Simulator in general, sort of where we're going with the different bits. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to run through a simple pre-flight. Now, the interesting thing with the 172 in the real world is there's a lot of little things you're not going to see, which I've commented on previous videos. Things like loading yourself up, measuring the weight of everybody. We have an interesting problem here. We're facing the wrong direction. We'll deal with all those things in time. One of the things they did for a flight sim is if you press the tab key, you can actually open up this handy dandy little page here, which makes it a little bit easier for the purposes of actually going through and getting everything ready to go. What I really love about this little device here is this basically gets all your checklists, your flight performances, everything all in one place as a one-stop shop. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load up the aircraft. So I'm going to go to Flight Performances. Again, the tab key opens and closes. For those of you who are so inclined, you can actually press that button here and drag it to another monitor if you have one. It is up to you kind of how you want to use it. I find it pretty easy to use just the way it is. So I'm going to go up to Flight Performances. We're going to go to Mass Imbalance. And then there's several different Mass Imbalance tabs across the top. We have seats, which represents the seats. We have the cargo version here. We have the cargo, which gives us the ability to basically put boxes and things virtually. We have the fuel, and of course, we have the ability to edit the center of gravity. I've never needed to edit this with the exception of the airship. And again, this is a nice safe range here. You can see we got that 16%, forward is 15%, aft 35 is our limit. The only thing you really need to think about here is if you were on a seesaw and we put all the weight on one side, the aircraft would tip straight up and we'd have stability issues, which is why I'm not going to fiddle with that too much. So let's go jump into seats here. We're going to go ahead and now load ourselves into the plane kind of a thing. I'll make it nice and easy. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the seat here. We'll go ahead and dial in some weights. I'll add 180 pounds there. I think that's pretty reasonable. After you do that, I just got to make sure you press load aircraft. It's going to say, did you want to do that? Of course I did. So you hit load immediately, and I'll go ahead and toss people into it. Now you'll notice it did not update this, but it did update that at the bottom. Now cargo, let's go ahead and give this thing a little bit of cargo. Let's say I want to carry about 25% cargo there. Press my load aircraft. It's like, are you sure? Yeah. You'll see the aircraft went as it loaded up all that cargo into it. Now fuel. One of the important things you need to know about all aircraft is they basically have a limit to how much they can carry. I know that sounds obvious, but the reality is you can't be afraid of the fact that a lot of times you're not going to be able to carry full tanks of gas if your desire is to carry a lot of stuff. So you take a look here that I have left and right tanks equally balanced here. I'm looking over across the top. I've got 28 gallons in one, 28 in the other. Now, some of you, of course, might be coming from other places saying, should that be in pounds? The reality is when you're dealing with aircraft this small, most of it is going to be in whatever your local volume unit is. For me, of course, that's going to be in gallons. Elsewhere, it's probably going to be in liters, depending on where you have it. So aircraft is loaded. I can see I'm 2,178 pounds. My max is 2,558. The interesting thing is it's actually not 2,558. And if you actually press that little button there, it'll break it down for you. So you can see we've got 255 pounds of payload. You can see my fuel on board, 0 fuel, and you can see my takeoff weight. One of the fun things here is it's not actually 2,558, it's 2,550. The 8 is basically for taxiing. It's considered our ramp weight if you want to think about it another way. So I'm going to hit the back button up top. I'm going to hit the back button one more time here, and we're going to come down to where it says checklists. Now, there's a lot of different levels of checklists, and in the real world, there's a lot of things you have to stress about as a pilot to make sure that they work. And like I said, it's part of the fun, as they like to say. What I like about Flight Sim here is they actually give you different levels of checklists. You have standard, advanced, and expert. The interesting thing here is if you do the expert checklist, you'll notice a lot of stuff in here are things that you can't really control well, or they involve very, very, very lengthy pre-flight checks, which are great if you just got your aircraft out of maintenance or it's the first flight for like the week or something like that. I find that a little excessive for the flight sim, but for those of you who are curious, that is available. I'm actually going to drop it down to standard here. So what you'll see here is we have a number of items, and of course over here on the right, you'll notice that we have ourselves our aircraft. So what you can do with this, which I think is really cool, is if you click the eyeball, it'll actually highlight the thing you need to do. So you'll see pitot cover, remove. So all we have to do is left click it like that, and it pops it right off. In the real world, the pitot cover will have this little thing that says little tag kind of dangling off of it, jumping in the wind usually, and that's just going to kind of let you know to do it. So what we do is we click it. Now the concept here is parking brake set. Now you'll notice there's nothing to set the parking brake out here. So what we're going to do instead is climb into the airplane. Now, there's a couple ways we can do that. We can press Shift-C, or you can actually click the handle. Now that's fun and everything, but you'll notice the fact that open this door and the door closes again. I would leave this door open. Fun fact, one of the silliest things ever broke on an airplane was the pins in the door. Fun story, fun story. Anyway, so what they're asking us to do is to set the parking brake. By the way, clicking this makes it go away. See this little thing between your legs here? That's a parking brake. Now, if I were to slam on the brakes, do you see how they're kind of wiggling a little bit here? In a real Cessna 172, to set the parking brake, you actually hit the brakes and then pull it out, and it holds the brakes in position. So that's just a little, almost like a flight simism there. So that's good to go. We're going to confirm that the ignition switch is off. You'll notice, again, for folks who are new to flying aircraft like this, that our ignition switch has several different positions. You'll notice it's got an off, which means there's no connection between the spark plugs, our magnetos, which generate the spark, and any sort of power source. You have a right, a left, and a both. As you will see many, many, many times as we get into more detail later, our aircraft is designed with a lot of redundancy to make it a little bit safer for us. So in this case, it should be in the off position. This is a very unauthentic key. It looks way too new. Remember, these airplanes are generally a little older. Ignition's off. Avionics master switch should be in the off position. You'll notice we have two switches for that. Basically what they do, when you see the word bus, it's not the bus we drive around town in. It's basically saying electrically we try to keep things separately in two different places for protection. Again, I can shut one bus off in the event that one's malfunctioning and back and forth. You want to make sure these are off because your avionics, such as your radios, these beautiful G1000s, are very, very, very expensive. So if you go ahead and start the battery, not only will you kill the battery faster with the avionics on, but you run the risk of damaging them during that start. We just don't do it. Keep in mind, in the old days, this was more likely to damage. Today, it's not as big of a concern. It doesn't mean that we don't do it anyway. All right, so they're going to ask us to go ahead and pop our red switches on. This is your master switch. In the real world, when you hit that, you're going to hear a and that's a technical term for all sorts of fun solenoids and things like that. You will notice that our G1000 display boots up immediately. That's kind of interesting that that happens. But again, I didn't wire this airplane, so they maybe chose to do that. You're going to get a bunch of angry screens. Eventually, things are going to start processing for you. And basically what you're doing here is you want to verify that this is on. And it is. It did come on nicely. One of the other things you want to verify is the fuel quantity. If you look in the left corner here, you'll see that we have full tanks. As a matter of fact, we don't have full tanks. Now, if you remember a minute ago, when I was setting up my airplane, I cranked it up all the way, but the gauge doesn't show that it's all the way. That is completely authentic. Fuel gauges are not the most accurate part of an airplane unless you have no fuel, in which case they're very accurate. So we're going to confirm that. We should be getting a bunch of no warnings down here. Low voltage, makes sense. Low oil pressure, vacuum, all that makes sense. Oil pressure, all of these things should be very angry at us. If for some reason this did not show that we had low oil pressure, I'd be very suspicious about what the front of the plane is doing right now. That looks good. Low vacuum annunciator. You can see we've got a warning on that. Low voltage, that checks. And as a matter of fact, as I'm sitting here, you can actually watch the voltage go down because I'm pulling 27 amps out of the battery. That's a lot of electricity. So now it's going to ask us to shut the master switch off. So we'll pop that off. Now, one of the things you probably observed is when I played with this red switch here, you'll notice that none of the screens did anything. That's because this brings the alternator online. Now, keep in mind that our alternator isn't running right now because the propeller is stopped. And the scary thing is you can shut the battery off and run off the alternator in flight. Real fun when you accidentally shut that engine off and everything pops off at the same time. But again, you don't want to do that because then we can't recharge our battery. That's really important to us. So that's all set. We're going to make sure our elevator trim is in the takeoff position. We're just going to come floating down here. You can see it is mostly in the takeoff position. Now, if I were to grab this and crank on this, you can go ahead and adjust this pitch trim setting. On a 172, personally experiences here, this aircraft, as long as you're pretty close to that line, you're okay. If for some reason you have an aircraft that is very heavy nose loaded like ours, you actually can crank this all the way down to the O and off, and that gives you a little bit more help when you're lifting the nose. Keep in mind in flight sim, you can take the stick and you can pull back as far as you want and nothing bad happens because there's no control forces unless you're force feedback. But just keep that in mind that in the real world, we'd need about that much if it was just us in the front seat. Otherwise, put it in the middle position. You're not even going to really notice it compared to it is in the real world. We're going to make sure the fuel selective valve is on both. Now, one of the things I really appreciate is they actually set the fuel selective valve to left. Now, you're sitting there going, wait, what? Why would they set it to left? Why wouldn't they leave it to both? It's actually a very interesting reason for this, and that's the fact that if you leave it on both, your fuel may become imbalanced because you basically provide a pathway for the fuel tanks to essentially mix. So by leaving it in this position, you're essentially doing that. You can actually go one step further and actually set this to the right position, because that means you can check to make sure the right fuel tank is actually feeding when you go to start it, and then you can switch to the left before takeoff. So it's a really nice little backup check. For us, though, they're going to ask us to put it on both, which is interesting. Like I said, it's interesting. That's interesting. Static pressure alternates. We're just going to make sure that is, let me zoom out all the way here. Again, depending on what version of this aircraft you're dealing with, that switch is going to have different places. But as we showed you earlier, if you ever can't find something, you just come over here and you push the button and it will highlight it for you. Static pressure is simply a way to give us basically, think of it like a barometer. If you pull this on, you use static pressure from inside the airplane. Did you notice our altimeter went, whoa? If I push it back off, we're going to be taking air from outside of the aircraft instead. So it's going to give us a very, very different reading. And interestingly enough, you can see this thing's struggling a little bit as we adjust that pressure. That's a little interesting if you ask me. Interesting. I'm not going to think about that too hard, but it should be more or less locked there. Good. Excellent. All right. So that's all set. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Control surfaces. Whoa. Shift C, by the way. All we're looking here is to make sure they're free and clear. In the real world, this is a little different of an experience. You hear this grunk, grunk, kind of a thing like that if you're being rough with it. But the key thing here is you look at your static wicks, make sure they're looking okay. You stick your head in here, make sure no birds. There's a really, really small hole, and you can almost see it right there where things like to live. So you just got to kind of keep that in mind. We checked that. We checked the elevator trim tab. See this little tiny piece of metal here? This thing is the thing that provides you with trim. Do you notice that it's streamlined to our lovely elevator? If I pull this up a little bit, see how it's completely across? That's a good sign that our trim is set correctly for takeoff. Like I said, in the real world, though, this would probably be pitched up a little bit depending on the way they rigged your airplane. It's kind of neat. They would ask us to check for antennas. Usually have antennas down here. This thing, that's in great shape. I can't get over that. But again, we just grab them. The biggest danger to antennas, this is going to sound funny, is the cover of the airplane, because when you pull the cover off, you tend to put pressure on it. So I can't describe the sensation of this thing, but if you were to imagine those little rubber door stops and you touched it, that's basically what your antennas are going to feel like. They're going to ask us to check this side of the aircraft. So we go down here, take a look at the aileron. Here's a fun thing I always warn my students, is whenever you're digging around inside of these things, apparently we'll just teleport to the other side of the airplane, because that's exactly how that goes. But one of the things you just want to watch out for when you're going through here is wind, because when you're digging up inside of this thing, you can see the little tiny piece of metal holding this thing on. You don't want your fingers to be in here, because if the wind goes wham, sorry fingers. The other thing, of course, they'd asked us to do is to check for the flap. The interesting step is they didn't have us put the flaps down, which kind of surprises me. But again, you can grab this thing, give it a nice little wiggle in the real world, and you could feel whether or not it's going to work. The big thing for us is, well, normally what we do is actually put the flaps down. So when we sit out back, we can look straight behind it and see if they're even. We can also push up against it to make sure it's okay. Excellent. Main wheel tire. So the main wheel tire, interestingly enough, we can hold our mouse over it and like examine it, so to speak, kind of a thing like that. The big thing we're looking for is no flat spots. Interestingly, in the real plane, if you stand on the brakes, no anti-lock brakes, so you just put a nice little flat spot in the tire as the wheel locks up. That's nasty because these tires are really, really expensive. And of course, so while we're down here, we'll go ahead and pop off the chocks here. We already got the parking brake set, so we don't have to worry about it. That looks good to me. Whoops. Oh, there we go. All right, nose. Now, when we check the nose out, there's a couple things we used to do in the old days versus the new days. I'll get this thing opening while I'm busy here. But one of the things you'd want to do is you see these little tiny screws that cover the cowling. There's not a lot to these screws. So one of the things you'd actually be doing is you'd be checking to make sure they're all secure. Like, say this cowling's bending out a little bit. And again, not the most aerodynamic seals here, which is okay. And there's where you can put your ground power plug there. But you can see these little ones. You go through and check each one of those individually to make sure it's okay. So when you pop this open, you'll notice I can see into this engine. That is completely wrong. This would be pitch black. You couldn't see anything unless you get your cell phone flashlight out. But while we're at it, we can go ahead and now confirm the oil gauge here. And the interesting thing is this is the world's easiest to read oil stick I've ever seen in my life. This is a dipstick, by the way. So, of course, I can take a quick look at that. Really, we're looking for quantity. One of the mistakes people make when it comes to oil, of course, is they measure it and they say, oh, that's 7.8 quarts. We're good to go. Or they look at it 7.5. Oh, I better put in 2 quarts. Don't, because if you do that, there's a little oil breather down here underneath the engine that will basically spray the oil out along the bottom of the plane. So if you want to clean that up, put too much oil in your plane. Big thing there is color. You want to make sure it's not black. You also want to make sure it's clean. Obviously, bring a cloth with you. It's going to take a couple times to get it. And they say 5 to 8 quarts, and they say, yeah, don't go past 8 quarts, though, like I said. Other things we're going to look for here, too, is this would never look this good if this were like a real plane. This would just be wet. It'd probably have a bunch of local I'm going to call it flora in it is the best way to describe it. We'd also take a look at the front wheel. And the interesting thing here is you see this strut that kind of has to do all the work of the bad landings. You'll notice that it's kind of short. This thing needs to be serviced. This would be a lot taller in the real world if it was serviced recently. So that actually kind of surprises me how low that is. Oh, well. Engine cooling outlets. We're going to pop that thing out of the way. Fun fact, that little piece right there, you want to make sure the cord always goes over the propeller. If you forget to take them out, the propeller will grab them and throw them about 50 feet in that direction. It's actually kind of fun, but it doesn't overheat your engine, which is important there. Again, pull out your flashlight and your cell phone. You can see the gear here. Everything looks good. Watch out for things living in here. Again, like you crouch down here, this would, again, have some of the local flora basically hanging out in it. So you just take a look at it. And again, if somebody flew this in the last hour, this would basically heat waves would be coming out of it right now. All right, propeller and spinner. Basically, what you'd inspect is our $35,000 propeller. This thing is brand spanking new. And again, you look along the edge. Once in a while, somebody tries to get a rock or something on the ground, and it sucks it into the propeller and goes, ping! And when it does that, it just, costs you $500, kind of a thing like that. But again, our propeller's in great shape. All right, to check the nose strut. It's looking pretty good, and we can see very clearly it's awesome. Come over here. This is the static port. For those of you again following along, because this is all new for some folks, you'll notice that this little tiny hole here lets air into that static system that we were fiddling with the handle with earlier. If anything blocks it, that means you don't know your altitude, your airspeed becomes unreliable, your vertical speed becomes unreliable. And again, an ant can get in here. So that's one of the reasons why they took the time to kind of cover it, like you saw, just like that. All right, so we go ahead and inspect this. Lights, a couple different ways we can inspect lights in this aircraft. One thing that I like to do is I fly with a co-pilot, my wife, who's wonderful. What she would do is to say, hit the power and give me the lights real quick, and she'd go and turn each light on. This is the old school lights. The new ones, of course, are beautiful LED lights, and they work fabulous. But again, you got to be quick about lights because it'll drain your battery. So we come around to the edge here, and again, the landing lights look pretty good to me. This thing is always loose for some reason, and this thing is so weak. This is a strobe light, by the way. This little bubble around it, not very strong, and trust me when I say that. So we'd go ahead and take a look at all those things. We check the main wheel tires as we did before. We'd check our ailerons and flaps like we did before, and of course, we're ready to climb in. This is the fun part. I love this. So we climb inside the airplane. The first thing you do in a real 172 is sit on the floor now. Close, actually. One of the things I would do is I'd open up the window, and you'd sit here and go to war with this handle trying to get this thing locked. It just goes every time you play with it. Swing it over here, of course. Again, depending on how hot it is. Today, it's kind of a fall day, so it's a little bit colder outside. But your co-pilot would slide in here. But again, no co-pilot today. We just have a lot of boxes, which I think is actually kind of cool that we just have boxes. All right. Want to see something fun? So I'm going to put this away for a second. And one of the things I mentioned earlier is I mentioned the fact we're facing the wrong direction. We could totally start and basically go like that and whip myself around. But the probability of this wingtip coming within a foot of this wall is so high that you can't even joke about doing that. So in the real world, what we actually have done is we'd push the plane back and spin it around. We're going to do that. Press Shift-Z. Now, you'll notice that we're in a different view here, and if you have a numpad, your 4 and 6 key here, you can actually change the direction of your aircraft dynamically, and that's good. Press Shift-C again. Look at that! And now we're in absolutely fabulous shape here. We're facing a direction we can actually utilize, which is awesome. Now let's go ahead and get everything ready for this part. So what they're going to do is have us set the brakes, which we've confirmed earlier. You do it again. Electric equipment has to be off. Now, there's a couple different ways you can shut electrical equipment off. In older versions of this aircraft that didn't have the lovely G1000 here, which you could actually do is basically twist all the knobs until everything was off. But again, we're just checking our switches to make sure they're in the off position. Basically, minimum battery expenditure here, especially if it's a cold day. Okay, avionics master switch. We confirmed that a second time. Fuel selector valve is in the both position. We're confirming that a second time. And we're also going to make sure the fuel shutoff valve is off. If you pull this off, no fuel. Push it in, we got fuel. It's actually neat that we have a separate knob for that. I like how they did that. Good. Now we're going to start the engine. We could do external power or we could do a battery start. I don't see an external power unit anywhere, so we're going to go ahead and do what they call a battery start. So the first thing they're going to have us do is they're going to have us push the throttle in 1/4 of an inch. Now, in the old days, what you used to do, and again, we don't have to do this because it's a sim, is you actually set the mixture and you go like that once. Did you see I pumped that? It's one of the things they did in the old days with Cessna is they actually designed this so that when you kind of pushed it in really fast, it would throw an extra splurt of fuel into the system, basically an accelerator pump is what they call it. So in an emergency, you got that extra, well, let's go kind of a thing like that, especially if your mixture is a little lean. We don't need to do that anymore, but that's just one of those kind of classic things you'll see people do as a way to prime an engine, which kind of sketchy if you ask me. All right, so we're going to take our throttle and put it 1/4 inch in, and you can see just about that. That's all it needs to be. It really does not need to be more than that. Mixture is in the idle cutoff. That's all the way out. Standby battery switch arm. Now, because we're a G1000 and we're very electrically sensitive, we have a special battery. And you'll notice if I click that to the arm position, the battery, the Garmin immediately pops open and it's going to scream at us and it's going to let us know that it's running off emergency battery and all that other stuff. And it's going to chew through that battery fast. But one of the things you can see here is we're burning 24.8 of volts, which is plenty for that battery. And we're only pulling 15 amps. So that's actually pretty good. So there's very, very little that's actually being energized by that backup battery. That's good news for us. Engine indicating system. We should have no X's through anything. All right, looks good to me. I see no X's. And again, we don't get the side screen here, so I'm not worried about it. Go to system, just take a look. I definitely don't need to play with that right now. There we go. System, yeah, there's no red X's through it, so we're good to go. All right, master switch, alternator, and on. So when we pop this on, watch what happens to our voltage here. Do you see that both electrical buses just popped open? We have the M and the E bus there. Main, we have emergency. You'll also notice there are 2 different voltages. That makes sense. Our main battery is actually partially discharged already, and our emergency battery is happily going along. Now, if you were to grab this and pull this to the off position, you'll notice it doesn't care. It's just going to reduce its voltage because now the main is actually providing voltage to both sides. If I pop that back up to arm again, you'll notice the emergency battery with a stronger charge, because we haven't abused it as much, actually takes over for that emergency bus, giving that extra kind of that we might need. All right, beacon light has to come on. I call it the beacon light. This one says beacon. A beacon because BCN is what you will see on older planes. And again, the beacon light, for those of you not familiar with it, is this little tiny light on the tail. That is the universal warning you're about to start an airplane. It's also known as an anti-collision light if you're looking for the different name. Cool. All right, if engine is cold. So what they're going to have us do here is they're going to have us prime the engine using the fuel pump. This is a weird process, and it's kind of the old-fashioned way of doing it as far as fuel-injected engines are. The new ones are all FADEC, and they're very, very easy to utilize, but we'll do it the old-fashioned way. So what they're going to ask us to do is put on the auxiliary fuel pump. The reason we have a backup fuel pump is even though we're gravity-fed tanks, if the engine fuel pump fails, we're in a world of hurt. So one of the nice things is they do give us an electrical backup one. And basically what we're going to do is use it as a way to kind of force some extra fuel into the cylinders, even though I just did that a minute ago. But remember, we're fuel-injected engine on this one, so it's a little different. Don't worry about it. We'll just do what they say. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on, and you'll notice nothing changes. We got no angry warnings, no switches, nothing comes on. If anything, your voltage would drop a little bit, and your amperage should come up a little. Did the amperage come up? Yes. That pulls 2 amps. Good. So we know it's working. Otherwise, you'd hear it too in the real world. So that's on. Full mixture. So you basically push this all the way in. And usually what would happen is your fuel pressure would spike a little bit. When that's done, we go ahead and pull it all the way back off, and we shut that out. Basically what we did is we took some fuel out of the engine, pressurized it so that it was ready to go, and then we discontinued that process. So we don't have too much fuel, which would give you basically a rich start. And that's not going to do you much good. That's good. That's good. Fuel pump. Ignition switch. Now, this is going to require a lot of exercise on your part. So what I do is I actually have a button on my joystick for this. But what you have to do is start, and when you hear it catch, you have to put some mixture in. Otherwise, that fuel we just built up and that lovely pressure goes to waste because there's no fuel to back it up after it gets us started. And now, one of the things with any start is you're looking at about a 10-second start time max. If it's not catching, you probably missed something. So again, just double check everything looks good. And what we're going to do is I'm going to use my starter here to help us out. I'm going to go right, left, both. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the mixture. I'm sorry, once it catches. So hit the starter. And we're just going to push it in as soon as it catches. That was the world's fastest start for a Cessna 172. I feel the Cessna company should come out and give me a special reward for how easily that started, because it doesn't do that in the real world. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to deviate a little bit from their checklist here because you got some potentials here. So we're going to pop it up. This looks good. Mixture's good. Everything's good. Oil pressure, we're going to check that. Oh, it never goes green if, oh, whatever. It's not realistic. It would never be that green that easy. Low volts should go out, which means the alternator is working. Navigation lights, we don't need them. It's not nighttime. And avionics bus switches come on. Click, click. Normally, of course, you hear a beep, kind of a thing like that. Now we're going to close it. Now, we spent a pretty good amount of time checking this airplane out, making sure everything's ready to go, everything's nice and groovy. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our engines to about 1,000 revolutions per minute. So the book will say between 800 and 1,200. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to take the mixture, and we're going to pull it out about halfway, so about 50%. So if you want a number, boop, there you go. 51%, close enough. And what we're doing is we're intentionally trying to starve the engine of fuel. Now, you're saying, that's a bad idea. The reason it isn't a bad idea is because our fuel has lead in it. So if we were to not lean the mixture before starting this thing, basically what you'd be doing is you'd be sending all this nice and cold lead particles into your spark plugs. And that could be really, really bad for you. Go ahead and press enter to continue. Our GPS display swings to the other side. Everything is all set and ready to go. So right now we're in the warm-up phase. And this aircraft does take some time to warm up. Now, one of the things in the real world, of course, is we're extremely careful about taking our time to warm up. These engines are very particular if we heat them up or cool them down too fast. They're air-cooled. And because they're air-cooled, once you start moving air over them, you have to be so careful with them. Even if this is a virtual plane, it's just kind of worth knowing that kind of fact. So while this is going, and we'll go into the G1000 next time, because there's really a lot to this particular unit. We're good to go. We're going to assume that we did our warm-up, which again would have been very naughty. We never would have done it that quick. But for the sake of today, we're going to go ahead and do it. So I'm looking out my window right now, and I'm noticing the windsock really seems to like the runway facing south here. So runway 21 here at 4 Bravo 9er. So that's going to be the one. The windsock also tells us a couple of the details, which you'll notice here is it's not straight. That means it's bouncing, which means we have gusts. The other thing you'll notice is it's staying in the same position a little bit. There's a little bit of rocking back and forth, so we have a little bit of wind shear. And finally, you'll notice that we've got about 1 knuckle worth of windsock, which gives us between 5 and 10 knots speed. That's perfect. We can take off either direction without much of a concern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disengage the parking brake. Now, make sure your brakes on whatever your joystick is are ready to go. Armed, looks good, looks good, looks good, looks good. So I'm going to go ahead and disengage my parking brake. Now, what will happen is in the real world, just as we see in the simulator, see how the aircraft starts kind of creeping forward? That's exactly what you want. So you don't have to go fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward and hold the brakes. All we're doing there is making sure the brakes work. If the brakes do not work, we'd be in a world of hurt. All right, so let's go ahead and make our way very carefully, casually towards our runway here. Again, 1,000 RPM is your friend. Try not to ride the brakes. If you're going to use the brakes, it's best to think of it like a truck brake. Speed up, slow down. Speed up, slow down. That's kind of the safest way to do it. Now, as we're taxiing here, people are like, what's the trick? The secret to good taxiing is think about your right knee. Put your right knee right where the little line of the runway is, and you'll be fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get the aircraft all ready and tested. Now, in the real world at Simsbury Airport, we probably would have done this over on the grass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line my plane into the wind here. Let me go ahead and show you. And the reason I'm aligning into the wind is, as you remember from earlier, the air comes in the front. So we need to make sure that it has nice, cool air hitting that at all times, especially when we're going to be rough with it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to check to make sure our aircraft is good to fly. I'll go ahead and secure that just like that. We'll grab that Hachoo, a checklist again. You can see it's hanging over there. Of course, this would be on my leg. This would be an iPad mini. All right, starting engine. We've done all that before takeoff. So it's going to ask us to do a few things. Parking brake, set, check. Flight controls. This is called wipering the controls. All you're going to do is smoothly just rip it through. See how it's got this nice little wobble going on? Very authentic. By the way, in the real world, you go like this, the nose would lift up. It's just kind of fun to do. Flight controls are good. Flight instruments. Now, this is where things get interesting. We need to make sure everything looks okay. So right now, I'm facing south. That's about accurate, so I know that's right. But we can also confirm it visually by looking at our compass. The magnetic compass should be accurate unless we turn on our propeller heating, of course. So this says we're facing about south. That says we're facing about south. So I'm pretty confident that this is reading correctly. I like that. Let's go ahead and take a look at airspeed. This should be about 0. It won't be 0 if we're facing the wind because airspeed is airspeed, whether or not it's wind. So we can see here, that's looking pretty good. Altitude, just doing a quick little check here. We should be between 180 and 200 feet, which we are. Now, let's say you got into this plane. Look over there for a second. Whoop, that's not what I want to play with. Let's say you got into this plane and you saw this and you're like, oh, it's 80 feet. Something's mechanically wrong. Well, it's because your altimeter, which is basically going to be, remember, it's a barometer, has to be calibrated for sea level pressure. So we have to know the air pressure at Simsbury to actually dial this in to actually get a good reading because it's going to offset based on the actual local pressure. It's actually kind of an interesting problem. Now, the cool thing is, if we're in Flight Sim, if you hit the comma key on your keyboard, it instantly sets it for you. But if you wanted to be a little more realistic, we could actually use the radio for the nearby airport, which for us would be Bradley International Airport, to actually get the altimeter setting. So if we were to come over here to our radio, and again, we'll get into more details of this later, we could go up to 118, and we can actually dial in the frequency of what they call the ATIS, or the AWOS, which would actually provide us with all the critical information that we need to know. So if we go down to 150, that's it, 118.15, switch that sucker, and this would dial in the local ATIS and actually read the weather to us. Now, the interesting thing here is...
Information echo, 1300 Zulu, wind 18 tree at 6, visibility 10, sky condition, ceiling 600 broken, temperature 16, dew point 1 tree, altimeter tree 017, ILS runway 24 in use.
Isn't that fantastic? That's the robot I always joke. So what she told us is everything we knew. We know the wind's coming out of the south. We know that the altimeter is correct. We know pretty accurately that our instruments are okay. All right, barometric pressure set. Standby altimeter is set. Do we have to set the standby on this one? Nope, it set it for itself. This is a backup one in case our screens die. That's good. Fuel quantity. I know it sounds obvious, but believe it or not, people forget. We have plenty of fuel for flights. Mixture, we're going to make sure it's set to full. Click. Perfect. All right, fuel selector valve. We're going to recheck that it's on both. Check. Elevator trim set for takeoff. Notice we're doing a lot of things twice. This is very important. Check. Let's see here. So what they're going to ask us to do now is they're going to ask us to spin up our RPM. What we're going to do is go to 1,800 RPM, check our magnetos, check to make sure there's no angry red X's, check the vacuum gauge, check our power, check the annunciator, and then pull the idle out. Let's do it. All right, let's do it. Make sure the parking brake is set. Make sure there's nobody behind you. This is a very rude thing to do in the real world. All right, so it's asking us for 1,800 RPM. And again, if you use a couple extra RPM, it makes the magneto check more obvious. But again, we're an air-cooled engine going up to 1,800 RPM on the ground. This is a little rude for this engine. All right, watch this trick. I'm going to hold down right Alt, click on this display, and what it will actually do is it'll pop the display out. For me, it goes on a third screen. But do you see how I can actually see the two displays kind of side by side here? So I can go like this, come down to my key, and you can actually see it live. Watch this. So we're going to click it to left. Whoa, that's a weak magneto. So we lost 100 RPM. Let's go and bring it back up. I'm going to go to the other magneto. This is the right one. Do you see how they're both about 100 RPM? Oh, that was actually a little weaker of a magneto. So the right magneto is probably going to have to get changed at some point. So I'll go ahead and give it some power there. It's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and run through all those emergency engine gauges here. Again, our engine page is very limited compared to what you'd have normally. Our alternator's working perfectly. Nothing amps being pulled through. You can see our vacuum gauge is perfect. You can see oil pressure, oil temperature is correct. We pull it all the way back to idle, and like I always joke, usually the engine shuts off when you do that. If it's the middle of the winter and you haven't taken care of your engine, good, bad sign, kind of a thing like that. And our engine is good. We'll go ahead and pop it up to 1,000 revolutions per minute, and our aircraft is now ready to fly. Now, very, very sharp-eyed individuals will catch the fact that we can't fly today, and that's awesome, because I was hoping you would notice that. And the reason we can't fly today, of course, is the fact that the weather is not good enough for a visual flight. That's okay. You can actually see this big nasty cloud. We can't go into this. And I'm glad that you noticed that, because that is part of the fun of piloting, is knowing when to go and when not to go. But this would not be a very satisfying video. It's already long enough as it is, if we did not go flying today. So let's go ahead and actually go flying today. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to make sure there's no traffic coming at us. Nope. And we're going to go ahead and get everything else set up. Coming down here, I'll go back to my back page. Go to my transponder. I'm going to go ahead and pop my transponder in altitude mode. That's going to let everybody around you know where you are and your current altitude. And we're going to go ahead and get ourselves all lined up for the runway. Go ahead and give it a little bit of power. It does not take much. And remember, you're no longer leaned. So we want to not spend a long time at low RPMs. Again, it's going to get really, really, really nasty to our poor spark plugs there. All right. So we're going to go ahead and gently make our way down to the end of the runway. Wouldn't it be nice if you could teleport like that in the real world? That'd be awesome. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way to the end of the runway. This is kind of not a newbie mistake, but I see people do this all the time. Please use as much runway as you can get. If you have an engine failure, that extra 50 feet will be worth $1 million, trust me. All right, so let's go ahead and hit it to the side. I call it the kind of flight instructor hop here. You give it kind of high RPM and you just sort of bounce the brake like this. Now, if you have toe brakes, this is really easy to do because you can basically do one of those things. And what you're trying to do is just get the nose all the way around. And we're going to line ourselves up with the runway. And again, you can see those nasty clouds. We wouldn't fly today unless we were doing IFR. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use one click of flaps for takeoff. Older Cessna 172s do not recommend takeoff flaps. This one, because it's 180 horsepower, we will use it. All right, this is your last chance. So we're going to do lights, camera, action. All right, lights, landing light on, camera, transponder, and altitude. Action. Are we ready to go? One last check of all your switches. If we need a fuel pump, if we're on one of those aircraft, we're good. 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready, and 4 to give it a little bit of power. Plane crouches, release, and get ready on the right foot. This is a very leisurely takeoff acceleration compared to its competitors. So what we're looking for right now is to get up to 55 knots, and then we're going to do a wheelie by lifting the front wheel about 6 inches off the ground. Trust me, that'll be plenty. There we go. Off the ground. Just hold it. Just hold it. Just hold it. Just hold it. And there we go. Airborne. Now you'll notice here that I'm pulling my nose up to about 66, 65 knots. If you look in the bottom right there, I'm going to zoom in so you can see a little bit better. You see I'm holding about 60, 62 knots. That seems kind of slow, doesn't it? It does, until you look out the window. When you look out the window, you realize there's big scary mountains and power lines right there. So I'm going to hold this until we get to a safer position. Excellent. We got about 500 feet of ground underneath us, actually about 300 feet of ground above us. So what I'm going to do is push the nose down just a little bit and bring up that click of flaps. And now we're on our way. So as you can see, this is an amazing little airplane. Lots of little things you can do with it. On our next few videos, we'll be kind of breaking down the actual quirks of handling, as well as what to do with this. Enjoy.